I am hitting the record button. Okay, we are recording. So today we're going to be talking about why oil sampling. Okay, why do we do oil sampling? And the truth of the matter is, it's because it does help. It's a proven science that we can actually bring in and employ it with our customers. So just as a little reminder of who I am, I'm Mike Hitchcock. I am in the sales department. I'm a CLS and an OMA. I've had numerous years with various companies in the automotive world, and continue that experience here at Acorn Petroleum, and have been here for nearly 10 years. So who is Acorn Petroleum? Well, we're just a company that provides lubricants and filters and fuel programs and things along that line to customers all through southern and central Colorado. So Heraclitus, he was a philosopher, a Greek philosopher who really talked. His whole thing was about how the world doesn't stop changing, that the world is in a constant state of change, and he literally did coin this phrase saying, "Nothing endures but change." And a lot of people have heard me say this one here, that no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man. And that's a very true statement when it comes to the condition of equipment. Equipment is constantly changing. It's constantly getting older, or its condition is changing. So we have to develop ways of monitoring it and understand what's going on with the equipment itself. So why oil sampling? Well, the technology has advanced to a point where program maintenance is just outdated. We'll talk about that in detail. In modern business, just to be competitive, all your resources have to be in play and be utilized to the maximum capacity just to stay competitive. Now, things are moving so fast. And getting equipment is even harder. So just to stay in business, companies have to move faster and employ more of their resources. The old time miles-based services, they waste resources, and they add an unneeded element of risk to your operation. Even the owner's manuals are telling us that things are getting better with the lubricants, but most manufacturers are calling for oil analysis, and they're saying that this is the best way to manage things. Some manufacturers even have their own labs. It really is the best defense against a failure and to maintain your warranty. Talk about my wife's very first new car, and this is when we were first married, and she wanted a new car to move the kiddos around in. And at the time, we only had 2 kids, and she looked around and she chose a 1984 Ford Escort. We bought it brand new off the showroom floor. It was her very first brand new car, and we still talk about that car. It's still to this day one of her favorite cars that she ever had, and it was easy to park. It was everything about it was easy for her, and she just liked it. And we ended up putting almost 200,000 miles on that car. And the point I'm bringing up is that it came with an owner's manual, just like every other car in the world. During that time, you didn't have to look it up on the internet. It was actually given to you when you bought the car. And everything in the back was based on time and miles. All the maintenance schedules were based on time and miles. And an interesting point is that it actually called out for the replacement of the timing belt. Had I read the owner's manual prior to buying the car, I probably wouldn't have bought it. But if you had to replace the timing belt, that just didn't make much sense, right? I've never had anything that had a timing belt before, and the thought of having to replace a belt that was internal like that just was kind of crazy. But it called that out. Every 40,000 miles, it had to be replaced. Mine broke at 35,000 miles. So, well, it may have been a fluke. Who knows? Whatever. So I did all the things that the Chilton's manual required to get to to do all the work to actually facilitate changing the belt. And it made it a lot easier in the future times that I had to change it. But but it broke at 35,000 miles. But wait a minute, I was supposed to replace it at 40,000 miles, but it broke at 35,000 miles. So I replaced the belt, sent my wife on her way. She drove it around, and the second one broke at around 35,000 miles too. So what this means is, to me, is that time-based programs, they have shortcomings. They don't always fit the mold for the vehicle or for the equipment that's out there. And, I mean, I learned that I had to change the belt every 30,000 miles. And I just did that religiously, and I never had any more problems. I never had to go and have the car towed back home. So that, but in the real world, we can't count on time and miles based maintenance cycles. They just don't make any sense. You still can have problems. That's why they have tow trucks. So why oil sample? Well, because most companies want to increase profits. And that's the reason why most companies are in business. Well, how do they increase profits? Well, we reduce costs, and we can reduce costs with oil sampling. We can be more productive because the equipment stays out in the field far longer when we start trending and start doing a normal oil analysis process. We reduce risks. We know when things are going to go wrong, or we know when things are starting to go wrong, so we can kind of nip it before it happens. We can make the equipment last longer. And then we don't have to replace equipment. That makes everything much nicer, much easier in the long run. So just like your doctor, when you go and schedule your physical every year, they ask you to go in and get blood work. And they can tell just about anything, they nowadays a doctor gets blood work done before you go in, and then you walk in there and talk to the doctor, and that's just a preliminary, how's everything going, what's going on, here, cough, turn your head and cough kind of thing, and move on. They know everything from the blood work. That tells them a lot more than the actual physical examination. We do the same thing with oil sample. We can look at the oil sample, and if we've got some good background on that particular vehicle or piece of equipment, we can see what's happening inside it. We can see what's going on. We can actually probably narrow it down to which component is wearing in the equipment, and we can predict what maintenance is going to be required down the road and when. And in maintenance and especially in warranty, we have what we call the bathtub curve. And a lot of companies will give you extended warranties on certain pieces of equipment or cars or vehicles or whatever. But it all is based on what they have found is the relative failure rate within the bathtub curve. And you can see there's three different lines, three different curves here. One of them is the wear out curve, one of them is the infant mortality curve, and then you have the observed failure rate curve, which is what we actually see. And the very beginning of that first section or the first third of the curve shows that break-in period that we all know. And then the middle area is the basically the longest part of the vehicle, or the longest part of the equipment that you own it, is the constant failure rate. This is where it's consistent. You know, everything's consistent. You don't have a lot of problems during that time. And then as the vehicle or piece of equipment starts to get older, we start to see individual components starting to wear out at an accelerated rate. So we start seeing more and more failures. And then we start thinking, gosh, is it time to replace old Betsy, or whatever we have to do? You can see it more clearly in this curve, because this is probably more representative and a lot easier to see. You see the infant mortality part of the curve, which is that very beginning. It's where all the manufacturing defects, all the loose screws, the badly manufactured parts and things along that line just rear their ugly head when everything is first being broke in. And then that middle section, things just kind of run normal. That's the useful life of the material of the equipment right there. And then things start to fall apart. It gets a little old, it gets a little long in the tooth, and starts to fall apart. Well, what we have here is this little line in here is where we want to stretch that out as long as we possibly can. We want to keep that going as far as we can. That's why we use good lubricants. That's why we use good maintenance processes and things along that line, so we can stretch that timeline and make it as long as humanly possible. It's this area that we start to question whether or not we need to get rid of the piece of equipment, or tear it all apart and do a complete overhaul, or what do we need to do at that point in time. And this is predicting when this happens becomes something that oil sampling can start to help you out tremendously. And if we don't do oil sampling, we just don't know when that is going to occur. We just all of a sudden start to notice that things are starting to wear out, and the equipment isn't working as well as it used to. So it's a guessing game. It's a surprise. It's whatever you want to call it. But those are the things we can prevent with a predictive maintenance program. And a little cartoon here about, I don't know if anybody reads Dilbert, but here the boss is telling everybody that Johansson has kept his job all these years because he has critical knowledge that nobody else has. And then Johansson whispers into Wally's ear and then dies. And then the boss is like, well, there goes the worst case scenario right there. Sometimes we have things that are just passed on from one person to the next who doesn't, it's what we call tribal knowledge. And then, all of a sudden that person is gone, and then we have no idea what's going on with a piece of equipment, or what the scenario is. But if we have good documentation and a good predictive maintenance program, we just don't have to worry about those things. So what are the types of analysis? Well, there's used oil analysis, which is what I'm primarily talking about today. And with that, we're looking at the chemical makeup of the piece of equipment. We can tell you exactly what's going on and why it's, what's happening. This is it's the actual, for the cost of the analysis, this is the best bang for your buck going into an analysis program. And then there's infrared analysis. It requires some equipment, it requires some data keeping skills, things along that line that you'll have to do yourself. This is a very good interim step if you want to, just check it. It just basically tells you what the temperature or the picture of the equipment looks like as it's wearing out or getting older and older, and you can see as heat starts to build up. And this becomes you can use this as a reference point, and maybe you have some baseline photographs that you can run through, and you can start seeing. Filter debris analysis. And we use filter debris analysis quite often. And what filter debris analysis does for us is when we do have a problem and we start seeing some anomalies in the used oil analysis, or we have a catastrophic failure, we can actually send the filter off to the lab. They back flush it. They find all the parts and pieces that are inside the filter and run some analysis on it. And basically can tell us exactly what component has failed, et cetera, et cetera. It's expensive to do it that way, but it does give us a better picture of a historical scene inside the equipment itself. And then we have vibration analysis. In vibration analysis, it basically tells you a little bit about what, as the equipment ages and probably loosens up or starts to wear out, you pick up vibration or anomalies in the way that the equipment is running in that scenario. It requires sensors, it requires some sophisticated equipment being installed in it. And it's probably, of all the programs that we're talking about, probably one of the more expensive ways of going in a lot of ways, in the short run. In the long run, it starts to become a little bit more cost effective. Again, all the way through, used oil analysis is still a very, very cost effective way of doing business. So what does the analysis do for us? It allows us to see inside the machine. It gives us an X-ray to see what's going on inside. It allows us to plan maintenance and replacements on our terms. This way we can sit there and say, well, before we send, unit number 7 out, it needs to go into the shop and have this replaced or that replaced or this looked at, rather than have the failure happen 200 miles away, where it's going to be more costly to do business in many ways. So this allows us to plan maintenance, bring it back on our terms, and it helps you to reduce the overall costs of doing business, as well as eliminating surprises when things happen. So in a nutshell, brings maintenance under your terms. It eliminates unplanned failures in the field, or it can eliminate unplanned failures in the field. Nothing's perfect, but this is about as perfect as we can get. It reduces tows significantly and increases uptime significantly. And as a byproduct of everything above, increases revenue and profits. So used oil analysis gives us a bigger bang for our buck. It stretches those dollars. Gives us eyes inside the machine, helps us see what component is failing. And then we can actually pinpoint with precision what component is failing and maybe even why it's failing. And that's a pretty important aspect of what we're doing, because if you know that you got to do a bottom end, it's easier to start there than somewhere else. It just eliminates all the other possibilities, and you can pinpoint where you have to go. Or if it's just a situation where you need to eliminate something that is causing a failure, maybe you can eliminate it before it gets worse. And using this, we can eliminate costly failures. And overall, save on lubricants. Make those lubricants last longer. In many cases where I see customers, when I'm doing an oil analysis, when I start them out on oil analysis, I see customers throwing away perfectly good lubricant. Some of them say it's cheap. It's cheaper to do it that way, but it's irresponsible in many ways, because it's environmentally issue. It's an environmental issue. Number one. Number two, it's just throwing money down the toilet. You don't want to do that. It saves you money. And doing all these things helps us get to a predictive maintenance situation. And what is predictive maintenance? It's one of the three modes of maintenance. There's run to failure, program maintenance, and predictive maintenance. Run to failure being the most costly, program maintenance being somewhere in between run to failure and predictive, and then you have predictive maintenance. Predictive maintenance being the single lowest cost in overall, it will significantly reduce your costs. And program maintenance is the standard time-based system that we've been using for decades. Change your oil every 7,000 miles, do the 250 hours of services every 250 hours, touch the equipment so many, do this every day, check this out every every month or every so many hours, those kinds of things. That's what standard time-based or program maintenance is. We're trying to move to predictive maintenance so that we don't have to worry about those things. In run to failure, there are things in every company, there's aspects in every single company that has a run to failure feature in it. And I was talking to somebody earlier where we were talking about the fact that even copiers or printers in a business, they basically run to failure. How often do you bring the guy in to do work on your copy machine? Probably when it's doing something wrong or it doesn't work anymore. That's run to failure. But there are certain companies that have equipment, maybe a single gearbox that's in an area that is just absolutely too costly to replace or repair or fix or test or do anything to, but you just have to just let it die, and then when it dies, you replace it. There's companies that do those kinds of things because it's actually more cost effective to just let it fail in that particular scenario. And we have customers that have gear sets in certain machines that, in their mind, they can buy these gear sets for XYZ dollars. It's cheaper to let them fail and replace them a couple times a month than to do any maintenance on them or do oil sampling or anything along that line on them, because they can buy the gear sets so cheap. I'm telling them, well, with a little bit of oil analysis, maybe we can prevent them having to buy those really cheap ones. Maybe they could buy better ones and they'd last forever. Who knows? But there's certain things that we can look at and test. But run to failure is the I know nothing out of Sergeant Schultz and Hogan's Heroes. That's the mode that you're running into. And predictive maintenance is the Sherlock Holmes, elementary, my dear Watson, I have the answer. And somewhere in between knowing nothing and elementary, my dear Watson, is the program maintenance situation. It's a compromise between the two. When we start to look at an analysis of used oil, what we're looking for is wear metals and contaminants inside the oil itself, additive condition, the viscosity, which is the single most important aspect of any lubricant, and the acid number or the base number of the oil, to find out if it still has all the components in it that we need for it to be a good lubricant. And using this information, we develop trends that help us determine the health of the equipment. And that's the single most important part of our discussion today, because without doing an oil analysis, you don't know what's normal for unit number 7 or whatever it is that we're talking about here. Using oil analysis over a period of time, we understand what normal is for that equipment. And that's huge. And understanding the trend is even more important. We do oil analysis on our fleet. I had the last vehicle that I had, we did a condemnation sample every time we pulled the oil out of it. And sent it into the lab. The lab kept on coming back saying that they kind of flagged it a little bit and said, this is, it's something of a concern, but it consistently came out with anywhere from 10 to 12 parts per million of iron in the oil sample. Well, 10 to 12 parts per million is hardly anything, but it's still something to be, in some cases, maybe it is a problem. But when the equipment is running perfectly, it's been doing that since day one. And over a period of 180,000 miles that we ran that truck, it stayed between 12 and 13 parts per million for the entire life of the vehicle. So that was the trend. The trend was that it was within that envelope of 3 parts per million of where we needed to be. The important thing is if all of a sudden it went up to 20 or 30 or something along that line, then we would have to look at it and figure, well, there's a problem. But because that is the norm for that particular vehicle, we just never looked at it. And we didn't have to. It gave us many years of good service, and we never had a problem with that piece of equipment. Because once we have a history, we can determine the trend of our assets. We develop the normal for that piece of equipment. And then from there, we can start saving lubricants, saving downtime, reducing the time that it's in the shop, reducing our costs overall, doing all of those things. And these are this is like the trends that we would see on one report. And you can see that there's one for iron silica, there's one for copper, lead, tin, there's one for chromium, aluminum, nickel, there's one for silica, sodium, potassium, molybdenum. There's, it goes on and on and on. These are all trend charts that we look at and we go, okay, what is in the trend? What is normal for this particular piece of equipment? And this is another one that we have and we watch constantly. And this is something to be very, very cognizant of. What we're looking for and what we're hoping to see is trends like this, where everything stays the same. Nothing is radical, nothing changes. And that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're hoping for. It's okay that there's something there. What is a problem when the problem comes in when something all of a sudden just changes. And that's what we have to watch for. Like here. This is where you go, what's going on here, right? And that's when you have to start looking at the rest of the report to see if we're in trouble or if we have an issue or what's causing the problem. And these are things that the oil sampling does give you. And this is the kind of heads up that an oil analysis program can give you with the condition of the vehicle. So getting to predictive maintenance, we decrease unplanned maintenance. We just decrease that totally. Or not totally, but as much as possible. And then we can start doing smart replacements as opposed to tearing apart and doing an entire rebuild on an engine when all it needs is something very minor done or changed to it, right? We start to recover revenue or retain revenue in many ways and turn that into profit. We can ensure asset availability, and that's important. We know what equipment is available to us and how reliable it will be. The people are happy. We start seeing smiling faces in the company. They don't have a lot of things to worry about. They know that they're working. They know things are secure. People become a little bit happier in the workplace. There's no more rolling the dice with a piece of equipment. You lower the risk. This helps you save money, not worry about whether or not a piece of equipment is going to fail, et cetera, et cetera. These are all things that we can lower, and the probability of certain things happening becomes almost nil. We decrease service losses, tows, things along that line. Equipment stays in play longer. We don't have products going bad inside trucks, etc., like in refrigerated trucks and things along that line, because we know that the equipment is the product's going to get to its destination in a timely basis because the equipment's going to run right. And then it gets us into the Internet of Things. And what we're really talking about here in regard to this is the fact that your samples are going to come to you via an internet web portal that'll give you all your information that you need to know. All your historical data will be in one place. You can get that on your phone, you can get it on your computer, and then all of a sudden you can take that report and forward it on to the maintenance department and say, hey, Joe, you need to look at this to make sure that we're, the next time unit number 14 comes in, let's take a very close look at that so that we can get this keep this machine running properly. And there's in many of the programs that are out there, there's back and forth communication that can happen within that web portal, and it makes it so much easier to keep everything in one place. So that, and you can get your reports on your phone, things along that line. So if you're out in the field and all of a sudden you have a critical piece of equipment or a critical report that comes back, you can get that on your phone and deal with it right then and there and take a piece of equipment out of service before it fails. And all these things work together, and they're all equal in many, many ways. This is this all, if we can start working through all of these things, then everybody's life improves significantly. So, all right, Mike, what's this cost? How much? It depends. It's on so many different things. What components are to be tested? Are we just going to do the engines? Or we've had, we know that 46% of all failures are coolant related, so we want to do coolant, or whatever that, or a combination thereof. Well, we have a lot of hydraulic failures, so we would like to start testing our hydraulics first and start eliminating those issues, or maybe do all three, or whatever it is that we're looking at. These are all factors that affect the cost of what we're doing. But it really depends on what your goals are. So do you want to, are your goals to solve some known problems that are in the field, or do you want to just, knock it out of the park and do a lot of different things to where you can maximize your savings overall? How far you want to go how far do you want to go to achieve the massive savings that we're going to be talking about? And that's what's important. And you basically, if we're looking at just doing engine oil testing, depending upon how many, at the worst case scenario, probably costs you about $100 per year per unit to do oil sampling. But the ROI on that very same $100 can be greater than $1,000 to $2,000 or more. It can be greater in just lubricant and reduced service time alone per unit, just by implementing oil sampling on engines only. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot of savings, but well, okay. Well, how many pieces of equipment do you have? How many trucks do you have? How many cars do you have? How many earth movers do you have? What is it that you have out there? You got to multiply that by that, and that's what your savings are. We can talk about that in detail, and we can actually generate a report that you can look at, and it would make this decision a lot easier for you in the long run. So, all right, let's do this. Well, it takes commitment to make this work. We have to have buy-in at all levels to make it successful. It just doesn't happen. It does take some buy-in, it takes a culture of commitment to make this work. And everybody has to be an owner in the program. Vendor support is excruciatingly important. Your vendor has to believe in this process, believe in oil sampling, believe in what can happen and how it can save you money. And that's what we do believe in this. This is why we're doing this program to begin with. We believe in oil sampling. And we have the experience. We've got dozens of other companies that we've worked with that we've brought through this process. And they've come out the other end saving and being more competitive and more profitable on the other end. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And your vendor, this can't be his first rodeo. It can't be. This has got to be something that he's done over and over and over again several times. Because I have picked up other people's oil sampling program and worked with the customer because the other vendor just came in, dropped some oil kits on his desk and said, have fun. We don't do that. We'll walk you through it. We'll make it work. Where do you start? We've got the resources to get you on the right track. We got laboratory services. It really begins and ends with a good lab. You got to have, and we have several to choose from. Trust me, we have a whole plethora of companies that we've tested, vetted, and worked with that actually can do a phenomenal job for you. They all have, one of the minimum requirements I have is that they all have certified employees working for them. At a bare minimum, they have to have OMA 1s on staff working. STLE, CLE, or CLSs and OMA 2s, if they have OMA 2s, that's even better. MLTs, MLAs, CMFSs, and all those certifications are just additional add-ons that if they have those are great too. But having certified people that have actually demonstrated a body of knowledge that they know what they're doing is very, very important. Being certified by the International Standards Organization, ISO certification shows a level of commitment from the laboratory that they're willing to do certain things to make sure that their processes and procedures are thoroughly documented. And believe me, those certifications are not easy to come by. But if you are working with a lab that doesn't have an ISO certification, you might want to give us a call. We can get you set up with somebody who does have documented procedures and ways of doing business, ways of documenting their results, things along that line. This is all important. Online portals, services, training and support. If they don't have training and support, most all of our labs that we have at least have online training or monthly training sessions and things along that line. And in many cases, we have local representation for all our labs that we work with. We have samples in stock. Believe me, I have samples in stock. If you need them, we have them. We've got training for your team, just like we have a program on how and why you should do oil sampling. We have training on how to take an oil sample. We have a training on how to read the oil sample report. All those different things we cover, and we can do on a one-on-one basis with your company. We're here. We're local. We're here to help you keep on track. And we're going to be here for a long time. And every report that you generate, we get, which is just an extra set of eyes to look at your reports to see if there's anything else that you might have missed or something that we can help out with. So this comes to the end of our program. And as I've said before, this is mile marker 0 on Highway 1 in Florida. Across the street, it says, this is where the road ends, but guess what? On the other side of the street, it's where it starts. So every end is a beginning. And if there's a way we can start helping you begin to have a phenomenal program, we'd like to help you. If you contact your local solution specialist, or the solution specialist that you work with our company, or you can call me at this phone number or contact me through my email, and we'll be glad to help you out. Thank you, and I'll take questions.